It is Friday, January 13th, and this is a special mini-sode episode of the Super Real Estate Bros podcast. I am one of the Super Real Estate Bros, Brandon Snyder, and I am here with my good friend.
Wait,
supposed to do the thing.
I didn't know we were friends. This is awesome. I found this out on live. DaveYourMortgageGuy.com.
We can do the finger wag. All right, Dave. Unless you've been living under a rock, a couple of days ago, and by a couple of days ago, I mean actually yesterday, we had a huge thing happen. So the CPI came out. Do you know what a CPI is?
Okay. A robot of some sort, I'm assuming?
This is why you sell mortgages.
I know what it is, but Brandon, tell the folks at home what it is.
Awesome. The CPI is the Consumer Price Index. So what this does is this tracks what's going on with goods and services across the country. And if you have been living under a rock for the past, 6 to 9 months, inflation has been a big story. It was one of the key talking points going into the election cycle. It was one of the things that absolutely flipped the housing market back on its normal kind of pre-COVID butt.
Yep.
And we have been seeing inflation just go crazy. But Dave, if you want to talk a little bit real quick before we talk about the CPI and what we saw yesterday, what did we see inflationary wise, and how did the feds react to the inflation when it came to the CPI?
Yeah, correct. Well, overall, the short answer is the government and the Fed is happy to see inflation getting under some type of control. That's why they did those drastic rate Fed hike increases up until now to get this result. With them being happy, the overall really guess in the industry and what we're preparing for is that on February, I believe the 1st, they're going to have a Fed hike. They're going to have an announcement. That's expected to be a quarter hike, then another 0.25% hike in March, and they're going to sit tight through the rest of the year. So you had massive jumps of half a point and a half a point and all this stuff. Now they're tapering that because they're liking what they see, which means we're going in the right direction to getting out of so-called the recession.
Okay, so I want to unpack this real quick before we talk about yesterday's CPI announcement. So you had for months the federal government raising the cost to loan money or
Correct.
to borrow money as a consumer because people were borrowing money for dirt cheap, whether that was federal bonds, mortgages, cars. I mean, we're talking like I got my car loan at 3% last year, and now the rates are like 6.5%. So they wanted to battle that inflation that was happening because everyone was purchasing and the supply was so low. So they kind of put a noose around the borrowing and the spending. And so they every few months or every month it seemed like they were raising half a percent, 0.75%. Okay, so they did that for so long, and that was one of the key indicators as to why the housing market slowed down, why people stopped buying as many cars, etc. Am I correct there?
Correct. A lot of things, prices jumped because money was cheap, and this isn't even just houses. I mean, you and I are going to focus on that. You just mentioned it. Car financing. Look, Rolex is skyrocketing in price. Sports cars skyrocket in price, comic books, baseball cards, all these things skyrocket in price because money was cheap. That caused a problem, including housing. And so to get that under control, the Fed raising rates allows really across the board for rates to increase in general. Mortgage rates don't automatically follow that. Some people think that that's not the case. It's more layered than that. But in general, all rates going in that direction to get a control of this.
Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about the CPI just to give a little bit more backstory to this. So I see a lot of people recently been making memes and things like that about the cost of eggs going up, but that's actually one of the things we've seen this past year. Your average cost of milk, you go to the store and your grocery bill is $150 instead of $100. Your eggs cost an ungodly amount of money. Your airline tickets, right? Even through travel season, it was ungodly expensive more So we've seen that. Okay. Now, a few months ago, really I think at the end of November, the feds came out and said, well, it worked. What we were doing actually worked. Sorry, Americans, it costs a little bit more to borrow money, but we're curbing inflation. So I have a graph here that I'm actually going to pull up that is from the New York Times. This was an article that got dropped yesterday. I'm going to share my screen here. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, just feel free to message us, and you're more than welcome to see. We'll send it to you, or if you can just go to the New York Times, it's on there. But inflation slowed last month thanks to cheaper fuel and airfare. So I want to highlight something really important here. In December, we were at a 6.5% inflation rate. Okay, and I want to talk about this trajectory right here. This is really important to look at as a consumer, because our inflation was absolutely bonkers towards the end of last year. I mean, we went, I think 9%, something like that, 9.5%. It was ridiculous. And then they started chokeholding the inflationary practices and started really like getting the debt and the cost to borrow money down. And then they ended up actually affecting it in a really positive way. So we went from 9% to 6.5% in just a couple of months. And Dave, here's something that's really interesting. So, and this is the New York Times, right? But this is the CPI that came out, 5.7% if you're excluding food and energy. And this is just a general statement about what's going on. But you can tell that a lot of the inflation with the cost of oil going up so high, we still have the war in Ukraine going on. But as strategic reserves started getting released and things like that, that allowed this, the cost of things to go down a little bit. So what are your thoughts on this graph right here?
No, I mean, this is honestly what they wanted to see. And I would go on the record, and I'm not sure what experts are going to say or other experts are going to say. I would say that this is actually aggressively going in the right direction sooner than some people expected, which I think is a really good sign that we're getting it under control faster than some thought. I mean, some people thought all those aggressive rate hikes and we would be leveling off with a high inflation and then at some point go down. So to see that graph go all the way up drastically and then really shoot down quickly thereafter, I mean, we're going in a really good direction and a lot quicker than a lot of people thought.
I love it. Okay, I'm just gonna highlight a couple of things from this article. Like I said, if you haven't seen this article, feel free to reach out to us. We'll share it with you. But it's just on the New York Times. So in November, we were at 7.1%. October was even higher. So it's trending downwards. One of the things we need to look at here, now this is still something that the feds are watching, is the cost of sporting events, airline tickets, things like that. So they're still watching that and they're concerned about that. But I'm going to pop out of this article here, and I want to talk about obviously what we do for a living, in and out, days in, days out. Let's talk about mortgages. Let's talk about people who maybe, and I know this has happened for so many clients of ours this past 6 months, man, when interest rates for a house are 7.5% going down to 6%, now that we're here where we are, and I think your last rate update a couple days ago was 6% for a conventional with a 740 score. Excuse me. Man, that's $400 in payment, right?
Well, all right. So here's the thing. I did some homework, right? Some studying before we jumped on this thing to really bring that. It shouldn't even be the Super Real Estate Bros. It should be a Super Real Estate Nerds podcast. With the way that you and I dig into this crap sometimes. But
I do have the Marvel right back here. I am a nerd.
Hey, man, we're totally nerding out. So a couple factors that I think come into this. Before we even dig into that, the thing that's most frustrating about what we're seeing is bad news gets shot out in a second and exaggerated. Good news barely gets put out and is definitely released slower with less attention. What do I mean by that? So rates, and we're going to use general examples when we talk about rates, right? Credit score, down payment, loan program can affect what your rate's going to be. We're mainly ballparking on an excellent credit person on a conventional loan. So when you hear these rate ranges, for those of you listening, you're not going to hear an exact rate. It just doesn't happen. So in October, I went back and looked. In October, roughly the 30-year fixed rate was around the 7.5% range. Okay, because of the Fed going up, because of everything else that's involved, the bonds and how mortgage rates are determined and all this other stuff. Super high. That's where all the fear came from. Oh my God, we're going to 8, we're going to 10. Oh my God, it doesn't make sense to buy. This is ridiculous, whatever.
Yep.
Since then, while rates have been volatile, so they're up and down all the time, sometimes on the same day, sometimes weekly. Since then, in general, rates have gone down. Well, as of today, specifically today after CPI coming out yesterday, you've got rates now in the high and some examples into the mid 5s on a 30-year fix if you're willing to pay for it. If you take a $400,000 loan amount and just at 7.5 rate to 6%, that's a $400 difference in payment.
That's the difference between getting someone approved for a house and not, right?
Number one, it's definitely that. Okay. Because what was the first thing you heard when rates shot up? Oh my God, it's killing affordability, which I disagree with. It's not killing affordability. It's affecting affordability. But a lot of home buyers who couldn't buy before, there was too many offers. They didn't have enough money to go over. They needed assistance, right, of some sort to get closing costs. They just were not able to buy in those years. As soon as that market ended, the rate shot up and pushed some of them out. Now that rate goes down and they can buy. That's not in the news, right? People, if you ask them, and I just had this call 2 days ago, the client was like, hey, are rates still in the 7s, right? Which is not the case and hasn't been, okay? And so you really run into not knowing and what's out there and kind of the fear. So rates are already going in the right direction, okay? So I'm going to piggyback off that and give my 2023 rate prediction, if it's okay to do this here live.
So real quick, before you do that, I want to piggyback what NAR said, okay? This is the National Association of Realtors. So I want to, before you give your prediction, I'm going to give you straight from Lawrence Yun, who is our chief economist at NAR, okay?
Yep.
There's a huge post. If you go on our Facebook, you can see it. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of terminology, rents increasing 8%, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Overall inflation is still 6.45. That's still above the average hourly earnings of 4.6. So they're still going to be working on that to make sure that, we get back to, I don't know if we'll ever get back to 3%. But here's the big thing out of Lawrence's statement. The 30-year mortgage rate dropping under 6% is now a distinct possibility. Excuse me. The gate is beginning to open for home buyers who got shut out in October and November when the rates went above 7%. However, and this is huge, I know you're going to talk about this in your prediction. However, there is still a housing shortage and not enough listings.
Okay, so here's what's funny. First off, he stole my thought, right? Maybe he was listening to me talk and he's like, I'm going to steal that idea on where rates are going. So let's do this. I'm going to give my rate prediction. After that, let's address where the future of this market is going to go in 2023 from a real estate standpoint, right? Because there's some crazy stuff that people are not understanding. And some of the news that's being given is they're exploiting the data. We'll just put it that way, right? If I want to give a message of, if I want to give a message of something positive or something negative, I'm going to alter the data to give that, not alter the data, but present the data in a direction. And we're going to dig into that hereafter. So 2023, here's what you see historically. I don't know if I'm going to be able to bring it up.
You want me to pull that graph up that you sent me?
Yeah, please, if you don't mind. You're since you already have access to it. So first, let's show this graph that Brandon's about to bring up is historically recessions and mortgage rates and how they're affected, okay? So there's actually a running theme with this topic. It's not just randomness. So if it's kind of difficult to tell, but if you go back to the thick column here on the left, that's the 80s recession, okay? And what you'll see in that yellow spot is the recession and rates going up, coming out of recession, rates going down. If you go to the crash of 08, same thing. We went into a recession, rates went up, and rates went down. Same situation that we saw here, but on a much, much smaller scale is the end of 2022, rates going up, and then now we're going to see the drop off.
Can I pinpoint something on this? I want to, you know, and this is just something I hear a lot because fear mongering is a tactic that the media uses. In 2008, okay, so I, you know, a lot of our colleagues will say, oh, well, in 1985, rates were 15%. We don't care about that. Houses were $60,000 and you made $3 an hour, okay? But what I'm really intrigued by is even during the biggest housing crash of the past 100 years, right? We had interest rates in the 5 to 6% during the crash and even post-crash. And then rates slowly started trending downwards and they went up a little bit in 2019, but they've always been trending downwards as, you know, the houses became more expensive, the interest rates got lower. So I want to pinpoint something here that 5 to 6% historically is a good interest rate. It's not great, right? Because we got spoiled for 2 years with, you know, 2.5, 2 point. I had a 2.25, which blew my freaking mind on a $400,000 house. But I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, but I mean, if we just teeter at 4.5 to 5, I feel like we're living fat and happy.
That's a healthy market. My first house I bought was at 6.5. And at that time, that was the running rate, and I was fine with it. I always say this, rates and home prices aren't my biggest concern because everybody will adapt to both. If rates are in the 5s, you're used to getting a rate in the 5s. What we went through will never happen again, and really on certain levels probably shouldn't have happened. And we're feeling that now because of that, right? I mean, I'm thankful for it, right? And for all of us who got those rates, super thankful. But truth of the matter is that's a once in a lifetime ever. They'll never go that low. A rate in the 4s and the 5s is very healthy. And that's what we're going to see. So me piggybacking, and we can probably take that graph down. Me piggybacking on that, here's my rate predictions and what I believe will happen, right? So you saw the graph. In theory, we're going to be coming into that slope, right? Where the decrease, we've already seen a little bit. Rates are going to be volatile for the coming months as in an up and down, okay?
Sure.
But I believe going into the second quarter of 2023, we're going to see rates start to drastically decrease and really staying in the 5 range. Some examples would be 5%, some would be 5.5%, depending on your situation, okay? And I truly believe once this is all settled, so it may be a year from now, I really believe we will end up being in the mid 4s once this is all settled and we stay in that 4.5 to 5s range and everybody gets used to that. I mean, for years, we're in that range. So I think we're going to go back to that. Now, for those of you listening or watching this, if your first reaction is, oh, that's fantastic, I'm going to wait until rates go down and then buy a house. Here's the thing. We are in a sweet spot for home buyers where the slightly higher rate is scaring away your competition, which is actually doing you a favor. It's going to sound weird, but a higher interest rate, if you're a buyer who could not buy in the last 2.5 years, a higher interest rate is actually your best friend in this market. Here's why. Not all buyers have come into the market. Not all buyers know that rates went down, okay? There's inventory that's having to pay closing costs and come down in price and all these things. Once rates go down, it'll become national news. a ton of people and buyers are going to come back into the market, making it difficult for you to get good deals and to get some of that help because there's going to be multiple offers. It won't be like the COVID years, but it'll be a very healthy market versus what we're seeing right now.
Well, I think this is probably a good point to say we're actually seeing it happen. I mean, because what happens is when the CPI comes out, most lenders, unless they're not so great at their job, will actually adjust. Like the rates will adjust ahead of time of that CPI. So the CPI is just confirmation bias for them, right? I mean, we already knew going into this week rates were going to be right at 6%, and then the CPI came out. Now that might help for a couple of days and might bring us 5.7, 5.6, but we're going to probably teeter around that 6% again. Like you were saying, it's going to be volatile for a while, but we're seeing lots of showings. I mean, I have listings that have been on the market for 90 days just because the market decided to flip itself over and try and die. And now they're alive again. These listings that are perfectly fine, nothing wrong with the homes, they have showings again. They're rejuvenated. And I'm really excited to see, the result of that and how this, and I don't really prefer the 20 offers on a house market. I think that we become order takers at that point. We're not really providing service. And then it's just who can write the best over asking offer and things like that. But I think what this does is allows us to, if you have a hot house in a good neighborhood, maybe it's got a pool, maybe it's next to the best school in the area, you're looking at 2, 3, 4 offers maybe. And instead of 80 grand over in cash from California, you're looking at, hey, we got a $20,000, all the offers are anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 over. And I think that's healthy. I think that's fair if it's the right house. Not every single house, 25 offers. There's people outside of the builder's office before they open waiting to go grab a lot. I mean, I went to a builder today where our clients closed and, they had a bunch of available homes. I think that's healthy. I think that's fine. But, I think at the end of the day, we want those interest rates to get lower. We want them back to 4.5%, 5% to create that. We want a little bit more competition. We don't want houses to sit on the market for 90 days. We want them to be on the market. The average in the country pre-COVID was 45 days.
Correct. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is we're in the Houston area, right? So depending on where you're listening to this, your market may be different. I talked to someone earlier today, and in Colorado, it's not the same. They're getting a humongous amount of inventory and not a lot of buyers. So it's a lot more drastic of a market than you have here. But to piggyback it, no, I talked to a realtor yesterday. He was showing a home at like $300,000, had a pool, nice yard. There was already 2 offers on it, which is crazy. So it is very healthy for this time of year for us already. So where is that going to lead into it? And so let's talk about the real estate predictions for 2023 and what you see this market becoming. Because I think there's a lot of layers on some things that could happen that are going to drastically change, specifically the Houston market, let's say, here coming up.
Yeah, I think, and mind you, I want to give the idea here that this market that we had will never come again. I mean, it was a once in a lifetime, at least in my generation, right? It will never happen again. So the expectation that we go back to craziness is just unrealistic. Like I was saying earlier, I think the best that we can hope for this year, if we can get interest rates closer to 5%, maybe in the high 4s, which is what most economists predict Q3 will probably get around that point, right towards the middle or end of the hot selling season across the country. I think what we're going to see is more sellers get their houses on the market because they're finally going to start moving again. I think we'll see more inventory hit the market. We're still in a shortage and we will continue to be in a shortage. The biggest issue is that we had the shortage getting shored up by the builders. Well, the builders stopped building as much.
Let's pause right there. So 2 things. One is sellers who felt locked into their house because their rate was, let's just make up 3.5.
Yeah.
They for sure were not going to sell to buy a home at 7.5. If rates come down to 4.5, man, that's right there at 3.5. It's a negotiable amount in their mind to where they're like, hey, it's close, right?
And if they can get concessions from the builders and from the sellers like they're doing now, then they're buying down that rate to 4% anyway. And then it's a no-brainer. Then it's no question, right? Because everyone has to move. And I think that's something that a lot of people are missing right now. The people that have to move, they're relocating for work. They're relocating because they're PCSing, because they're military. They lost a job. They are moving to a different state to be with family. They're moving 3 families together to be a multi-generational household. People still have to buy and sell real estate. The question is how long is the market going to wait, or how long is it going to take for the market to adjust for the have-tos and the want-tos to be in the same market again?
So I think, and I've talked to other experts on this, we could be a 1 year to a 2 year period before you truly see it balancing out and being a normal market like years prior to COVID. I'm not saying that it won't be a healthy market. I'm not saying that there won't be a lot of transactions. I'm purely saying that we have some road to go for some of these things to normalize, such as, which I wanted to piggyback on your comment about builders. I believe, and this is a prediction, I believe builders are going to change the way they operate this year and moving forward, because you cannot build a home. Say you're going to sell a product at $450,000. The market turns. KB came out and announced that 68% of their buyers canceled contracts in the fourth quarter. Now you're having fire sales to move homes. You're losing money. So and I'm just making a scenario. You knew you were going to sell it at $450. Now you're fire selling it at $380. You're losing that money. I believe builders are going to change the way they build and release product homes in the future, along with some of them may go to that build to rent option out of fear, because yes, if I build an entire neighborhood and sell it to a hedge fund and I make 20%, that's better than building a whole bunch of randomness, hoping to get a higher price and then taking it in the shorts if the market was to turn or there was fear. It's a safer bet for them. So I think
I have a stat for you. Hold on, I'm Googling, because you just hit on something, and we can talk about this in another podcast episode, because it would take a whole different episode to do it.
We will. We'll call it build. We'll have to do something just strictly on builders and the future.
Okay. Let me see. So as of September, 400,000 out of 85 million homes. That doesn't sound right. That number's not right. I don't have the exact number, but here's the thing. Hedge funds bought up so much real estate last year that they're never going to release back into the market. So what's going to happen? This is my prediction right now.
Wait, hang on. Why? So hang on. So I want to dig into your prediction on. So you said hedge funds bought a ton of real estate, which is true, and that they're going to release it back into the market?
No, they're not going to.
They're not going to release it back in the market.
And that creates
that's an inventory problem.
It's an inventory problem. So we still have, and this goes back to what Nar said, we still have an inventory problem. So, and I bring this up because you hit it on the head, right? The rent to own communities are going to become more and more popular, but the average investor cannot get into those communities because the hedge funds are going to keep buying them. Blackwater bought billions of dollars in real estate last year. They're not getting rid of those assets. They have cash flowing assets. And those are, they're going to have valuations of even more billions of dollars in the 5 to 10 years that they gain equity in these homes. So one thing that I will say right now, I think that if you are the average investor, maybe you own a couple of doors or you're trying to get into it. I just locked in an investor at 6.5% on a rental property. That's good. That's competitive. That's what you were paying anyway during COVID. Investment rates were 5-6% anyway, right? So
and historically they were that before. Like when you bought an investment property, you were preparing for something in, the upper 5, 6 to 7 range to begin with. So absolutely.
So if you're the average investor, Blackwater didn't stop buying. Zillow stopped buying, but that's because they imploded on themselves. Blackwater didn't stop buying. The hedge funds didn't stop buying. I'm still getting calls daily, right? These people are buying houses at scale. Why aren't you? Why aren't you buying real estate? This is the time to do it. You don't have to go fight 20 people to go buy an investment property at $200,000 in Houston, Texas. You will in 6 months.
Correct. And I think there too, and I not to correct you, I think it's Blackstone.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Blackstone's the grill company, Dave.
No, Blackstone is the investment hedge fund. I'm pretty sure. But while Brandon's Googling that, but
all right, it is Blackstone.
Yeah, I may or may not be an investor in Blackstone because I like to watch what they're investing in because that's a tail sign of where a lot of things are going. But it's without a doubt that's changing what it's looking like for the future. And we're really known as the biggest, most affordable city in the country. Yeah. So anybody looking at the whole United States as a hedge fund is smart enough to say, hey, there's a huge upside in Houston. That's why they're doing this. They're not buying them in New York. They're not buying them in California more times than not because they're overpriced, right? And it's extremely volatile versus here.
Yep.
And so that's 100% something that'll affect inventory. Builders being concerned will affect inventory. The amount of foreclosures at this point, which is probably another podcast too, is
we're going to talk about it next week.
Correct. So not to watch that podcast, but in theory, everybody's like, oh my God, there's going to be all these foreclosures because the percentage of foreclosures is high. It's ridiculous. There's like examples where people are like, it's 187%, blah, blah. You're going from 0 foreclosures to any amount, but that amount is going to be on par with a normal market. So the foreclosures aren't going to save inventory. And this hedge fund and this building thing is aimed at really starter homes and those people getting in. So those are the people who want to buy. That's just why Brandon and I just got done saying, if you couldn't buy in the last 2.5 years, I think you've got a window to get a steal, and a higher interest rate, even though they're now going down drastically, the higher interest rate could be your best friend to veer off your neighbor.
Yep.
Right?
Just got a client 50 grand off on a new construction. They actually let us put in a verbal offer. They said, hey, this is the price. I said, well, we're going to give you this. And then they came up, they countered at like 5 grand higher than our offer. And we got 50 grand off the sales price. It's 100% happening across the board. So I think we got kind of derailed off of the CPI. So I want to circle back around so we can end this because this mini-sode turned into number 7 full episode. But correct. Let's talk about it real quick. So the CPI came out. The good thing is that we are in deflationary practices right now. Now, mind you, I know some of you are going to gripe, well, eggs are expensive and it cost me $500 to go watch the Lakers. Yeah, those things are still expensive. But we're seeing a downward trend, which means interest rates will continue to go down. And right now, if you are a real estate buyer, if you are looking to get into the market, then now is the time. You don't have to fist fight 20 people in a parking lot. You don't have to go put in a cash offer. You don't have to go use one of those programs that they used. You know, I still utilize Orchard, Homelight. They have cash buyer programs. You don't have to do all those things anymore. You don't have to go. You can go get a seller to pay your closing costs. You can go buy the rate down with that money. I mean, there's so many things you can take advantage of now that you won't by the end of 2023.
And I would say, forget even the end. I would say come summertime, it's going to be a moot point. I mean, you've got a window of, I would say 4 months, not even anymore, but I would say about 4 months of, hey, there's going to be some great deals. I'm in the market. I'm serious. I'm going to change my life with these moves versus waiting. So no, it's super exciting. Everything is going in the right direction. Everything is expected. So everything that's happened is expected. If anything, it's probably happening faster, right? And I think that's a great sign going into 2023.
So would you say that the recession is in recession? Stay tuned.
I wouldn't, because that's corny as hell.
All right, look, Dave, as always, one of my super real estate bros. You're an awesome friend, a mentor, and I appreciate what you contribute to the real estate community in Houston. Y'all, if you want to know more information about the real estate market in your area, please feel free to reach out to myself. If you're looking for a lender in, I think, 48 states, DaveYourMortgageGuy.com is the way to get a hold of Dave Your Mortgage Guy. And once again, we are available on any podcasting sites, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., Google Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, on our page, Selling with the Snyder Group. Dave, your mortgage guy, has a YouTube as well. All over social media on the same things. Dave, your mortgage guy, Selling Snyder Group, etc. Y'all have a great week.
Bye, guys.